We'll do it live. It.
Andy Jackson.
How's it going?
Great. It's an honor, sir. I've been a Zebra fan since I was 10.
A long time.
Yeah, and it just so happened this album just turned 40. Is that right?
Yeah. 40 years old.
So if you do the math, I'm 50.
Okay. That's true.
Man, I don't even know where to start, but I like to do a little quirky question right off the bat. And I'm going to put you on the spot. If you don't know it, it's fine. I'll tell you the answer. Where were you July 17th, 1983? Does that ring a bell?
I was probably doing a gig, but maybe not. Where was I? Tell me.
All right. You were opening for Journey and Foghat at Tad Gormley Stadium in New Orleans, Louisiana. Rock and Roll Super Bowl.
I had some of it right. I was doing a gig, but I didn't realize which one it was. Yeah, I remember that show. I remember that show.
Tell me about it. What do you remember from that? Because it's sort of a hometown show. It's a big deal.
Yeah, it was great because that was where I saw my first concert. Believe it or not. When I was your age, I was 9 years old, something like that. I went to see the Beatles at City Park Stadium, and this was the first time. Yeah, this was the first time we were playing there, and it was a great show. They gave us the keys to the city at the show, and everybody was into it. The album had come out, and we had a good time. It was great.
Wow, that's awesome. A key to the city. That story I got from Kyle Thomas, who is a singer for another New Orleans band named Exhorter, thrash, 80s. Yeah. You've heard of him?
Exhorter, yeah.
He told me that story. He saw my records back here. And we started talking about it, and I asked him, have you ever seen Zebra live? And he told me the story about Rock and Roll Super Bowl, Tad Gormley Stadium. He said it was slightly raining.
Yeah, it was a little overcast.
And it was I believe the second concert he was ever been to. So I know the Beatles are a huge influence, and a big part of your musical career and influences. What was that like seeing them at 10?
It was crazy. I mean, all I had known up until that point was like Fred Flintstone and Huckleberry Hound,
Yeah.
So, and all we had seen of the Beatles was on Ed Sullivan. But I already was real familiar with the music, and my parents got tickets for my brother and I and them to go see the Beatles, and we sat kind of way up high, away from all the teenage girls, and got to watch the whole thing unfold. But it was pretty much just like you saw it on the Ed Sullivan Show. The girls were going wild, screaming, jumped on the field, broke through the couple of lines of policemen were trying to hold them back from the stage, and it was all the craziness that you were expecting,
Wow.
I remember there was a family in front of us who had a teenage girl. I would guess she was probably about 14 or 15 years old. And towards the end of the show, she was trying to run down onto the field, and her father had her by the arm. He's holding her, and she's like screaming, "Let me go! Let me go!" Yeah, and then, "I love you, Ringo! I love you! Let me go!" And she's like going crazy. It was like The Exorcist right there.
When you were mentioning going to see the Beatles at that age and your parents being very supportive of that, and I grew up in New Orleans as well, the culture of music in New Orleans is very deep and very rich, and people really appreciate it. And other cities can say the same thing, but that's just my experience.
Yeah, and New Orleans has its own style of music. A lot of cities. I mean, you might see Nashville and they say, well, they're country, but you know, but did it really start in Nashville? No, I don't think so. You know, country
Right.
was like all over the place, you know, when it first started.
Mm-hmm.
But New Orleans, you know, there was definitely that New Orleans jazz style originated in New Orleans, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of the great blues and jazz artists came from New Orleans, were from there and recorded there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Jazz City Studios was a place that recorded so many of the early hits, you know, from that generation, and influenced, you know, pretty much everybody, you know, from Led Zeppelin to the Rolling Stones. I mean, it's pretty incredible what came out of New Orleans, and so there's a lot to be proud of there. You know?
Definitely. Kyle, when he was on with me, we talked about that, and he brought up a New Orleans band and song particularly that he thought had a lot to do with it. Now, there is generational differences, but we're Generation X. But he mentioned the Meters. They all asked for you.
Oh, I love the Meters.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they definitely contributed a lot to the New Orleans sound, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Neville was doing stuff back, you know, way back in the 60s, and but you know, you can go back further than that, and you got Fats Domino coming out of New Orleans, you know, and that was a huge influence, you know, on rock and roll and blues in general.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Irma Thomas, of course, and you know, Professor Longhair. I mean, you got, it's incredible, the people that came out of New Orleans,
mm-hmm.
And influenced so many people.
Yeah, and then it kind of obviously, like most genres of music, there's different niches and different genres within it. But as far as, like, I would call it rock and roll to heavy metal, New Orleans really has a distinct sound and a reputation that's bigger than what they are in New Orleans, you know, outside the world. I see that happen a lot with New Orleans bands. But Kyle and I were talking. I brought up a list. I said, here's the New Orleans rock and metal landscape. Like, the top is Zebra, and he agreed. Second, I put Lily and Axe. They had, you know, around the same time as Zebra, a little bit after. They definitely had some success. I put Exhorter as third. I mean, they were on the metal label in the early 90s, 2 records. Kyle and Exhorter is still touring today. There's another band, if we go even further to just a swampy metal, it's this band called Acid Bath, who has been out for a while. There's a cult following there, and they mixed a lot of different genres between psychedelic to death metal. I mean, and everywhere in between, bluesy. They're very, very good. But anyway, Zebra. Everyone has a Zebra story. That grew up in New Orleans. What's that?
We've been around a long time.
Yeah. And I do want to get out of New Orleans, but I want to talk about New Orleans first.
Yeah, sure.
Everyone mentioned St. Christopher and seeing Zebra play at dances.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
Well, it was like in the beginning, and it was great. You know, those were some of the largest crowds we played in front of.
Wow.
You know, it gave, you know, we were playing nightclubs at the time, also. And, but, you know, these kids couldn't get into a nightclub. At least the guys couldn't, you know.
How old were you guys at the time?
Well, I was 20 when the band started.
Okay.
1975. And, you know, like some of the drinking age was 18 at the time. You know, people had fake IDs and stuff, but usually the girls that were younger were able to get in easier than the guys, you know. But with St. Christopher's, you know, what we're talking about was a place where, you know, you could come, all ages, anybody could come, and we had great crowds at the CYO dances. There were several, St. Edward's, but I think you're right, St. Christopher's was the one we played the most, and yeah, a lot of good times. I'm sure there was a lot of crazy stuff that went on that we knew nothing about. You know?
Of course not.
Yeah.
No, Zebra is a wholesome band. I think anyway. And that is something I want to ask you about, is your lyrical content. Very deep, very relationship based. I wouldn't. I would think it's not too far of a stretch to say you're a very sensitive person.
Yeah, I would say so. I wanted the lyrics to be like that. Try to put some thought into the lyrics. I mean, not all the lyrics are are really deep. Some of them don't
No.
mean anything, but with me writing a song, I want to be drawn by the music first, and the lyrics. If they like the music, they'll listen to the lyrics. So
That's true.
really pretty much all about the music first. But when I would get into writing the lyrics, yeah, I wanted it to mean something.
Sure.
Figured something I could look back on, and wouldn't be embarrassed that I wrote it.
No, they held up they've held up. I really liked the lyrical content. I liked it back when I was in high school, riding my bike along the lakefront, Lakeshore Drive. I'd have 4 cassettes. I'd have Zebra, No Telling Lies, 3.5, and Live. And it was just one of the 4 was being played at all times.
Oh, thanks. Yeah,
Yeah.
they had a good run with those.
It's really special. And I think anyone who was at St. Christopher remembers it. And that's pretty cool to be 40 years later and still talking about it today. What happened in a little private school.
Yeah, in the gym. In the gym, yeah. I remember it well.
Yeah. I want to ask about, I can go into just so much detail about these 3 records, but I was listening yesterday to 3.5, which I think is, I mean, I love them all. I really love this record.
Thanks.
It's like a kinder, gentler Zebra, but it's still got the Zebra edge. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and for me, I think it, as an album, it works the best out of all of them. It flows better,
I think so.
And it, all the songs were written at the same time. I wrote the whole album while we were on the road for the promoting the second record. And I think the only song that might have been a little bit earlier than the second record was Hard Living Without You. That was a song that we had, but it worked on the record too. It fit right in with with kind of the theme of everything that was going on. So
yeah, I think so. It's a second to last song. I never really thought of it as out of place.
No, it seemed like it fit pretty well. So
I was listening to the song Can't Live Without.
Right.
The notes you hit, there's very few songs that just like goosebumps, that note. So what was it? Did you remember doing that take in the studio and were you like, yeah, I nailed that one?
Yeah, I mean, I had that record was tough for me to sing. Overall, forget about the high notes. I actually, believe it or not, think that the higher notes were the easier parts. I didn't have much problem doing the high parts, but I had a real problem because we were producing the record ourselves with my pitch in the studio at that time. I'd go back in the control room after I'd listened to, what I had just done, and I'd be going, I sang that. That doesn't sound like what I just sang, but it was obviously, it's on tape. Yeah. And it took a long time to get the takes that I wanted to for those songs. So funny enough, after that record was over, I went to a vocal coach because somebody told me, you know what, your pitch can be improved by going to a vocal coach. And I said, but what's the difference going to be in my ear? He says, oh no, you got a great ear. You just have to learn, really how to control the muscles a little better than you're used to live because you didn't have to be so perfect live, I said, okay. So I went to a vocal coach in Manhattan and, within 6 months, I was like there. I was like, I could sing this stuff, go back and listen to it and not cringe, I hear it, Now we had done the first 2 records, but, I would sing and Jack Douglas would, put the vocals together. He was producing the record. So I didn't have the ordeal of having to piece it together. But when we were producing it ourselves, had to sit there, and it was lot of work, I had to do on that, but made a really big difference going to take those vocal lessons. Even at that point, that was the third Zebra record. After that,
Yeah, well, it shows because I think in the year 2023, the clips I've seen of you recently and your entire career, honestly, has always been good live. I don't think you lost a step. I hope to be able to see y'all in New Orleans.
Yeah, we're coming there in November.
Yeah. All your songs are, I would think, challenging to sing. I'm really attracted to the highs. Would you call that falsetto?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, since the band started, my whole thing was to try to blend my natural voice with my falsetto and try to change between them smoothly. That's always the challenge. And, I've been doing it since like 1975. So all the songs that I've been singing have been like lean towards that, because they were all, people wanted to hear more stuff that was like a little out of my range. Now, Guy and Felix both sing too. They both sing lead, and they did a lot of lead singing back in when we first started off. Guy used to sing a song called "You Fool No One" by Deep Purple. Really high, strong vocal.
Was that Ian Gillan?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, it was, great song, but he used to sing the lead on that. He had a powerful voice for doing that. Felix sang Aerosmith and some Stones stuff. Everybody took a turn singing some Led Zeppelin, but, it was just a little bit out of everybody's natural range, but I was able to do the falsetto thing and switch to it a little better. So I ended up singing the Zeppelin and then started translating that into some of the original stuff we were doing. So that kind of became my style,
I like that. I've always liked that about music and singers, not to mention what a phenomenal guitar player you're on. I do want to talk about Guy and I do want to talk about Felix. But I've always been, I think that's what attracts a lot of people to Zebra, and what attracted my ear at a young age is the switch up of the vocals. And as my musical taste got heavier, I started liking singers like Phil Anselmo for Pantera. Yeah. He would do some of that falsetto, and then he was doing the heavier.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, that stuff and some shrill. But I always, and there's a guy Mike Patton of Faith No More. He's got a wide range. Axl Rose, when Appetite for Destruction came out, I was like, wow.
Yeah, Axl was able to do that switch pretty quick too. He's got a good voice.
And really even like death metal bands, I have a wide variety of tastes. I like the heaviest of the heavy, and I like pop. I
gotta give credit to some of those guys, because the way they rasp their voices out, I couldn't do that. I mean, I would last like a song and a half and I'd be done.
True, but
it's a technique.
It is definitely, and the game has been getting, like, just like in sports, when records keep getting broken, they're doing more things with their throats. Like what I've been seeing like the last year is insane to what guys were doing like in 2000 or 1990.
Right.
It's wild, but those guys couldn't sing falsetto.
Right.
I don't think they could. I think what you do is just as difficult to do with death metal.
Well, you definitely have to work on it. There's no doubt about it. And it's a different animal. It's a whole different technique, a whole different approach to singing. And but like I said, I mean, I listen to some of those guys, and it's just like, man, like I couldn't do that. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even know where to start. I mean, I could certainly do maybe a song, but
could you?
Some of the raspy stuff, making your voice go like that, it would just wear me out in an instant.
Yeah, it's a lot of it's like taking all the emotion from the Zebra songs and then like amping it up with a bunch of anger behind it.
Yeah.
And then throwing in a little bit of melody and a little bit of like the sensitive side of real like angry dudes,
Yeah.
But not just, I mean, have you seen the drummers these days?
Oh yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
If you ever watch a playthrough for like a band like Oh God. I mean, Meshuggah for one.
Yeah, I mean the double kicks
Yeah.
and just like they're like machines. It's crazy.
Now credit to Guy. He's
Yeah.
Guy Galso, drummer for Zebra, is the first. Yeah, first of all, to all my new listeners or anyone who's come across this, Zebra has been together since 1975.
75, yeah.
So this record came out in '83, and these guys are still playing together. There's no lineup changes. These guys, it's amazing. But Guy he had the double bass kick, and I noticed that as a youngin.
Yeah, and Guy's a monster drummer, you know.
Oh, he is.
He when he joined the band, his big influences were like Mitch Mitchell. He was more of like a jazz oriented drummer, you know.
They make the best metal drummers.
Right, and he you know, he loved the jazz, and there we were doing these songs that he wasn't really like digging too much. Well, not that he didn't like the songs, but he just didn't play that style. Mm-hmm. But he picked up on it pretty quickly, and you know, I look at him doing some of his solos today, and it's like he's better than he ever was. I mean, he's 70 years old now, and it's like he's exhausting to watch. You know, it's crazy.
Wow, that is awesome.
Yeah.
I heard you saying that 10 years ago about him.
Yeah, and it's still getting better. It really is. It's unreal.
He's still banging the hell out of those drums.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he is phenomenal. All of you guys are phenomenal. I mean, Felix is just an unreal bass player, an unreal keyboardist. And like you mentioned before, their background vocals are just perfect, you know, behind you in lead. Yeah,
you know, for three-piece, it's worked out good. Everybody's singing and doing what we do. So,
like one thing I talked about Kyle and Exhorder, I'm sorry I keep bringing them up, but there's a lot of similarities. They're playing 30 years on their first record, I believe it's been, or since they formed, and you guys are playing for 40 years on this record.
That record's out for 40 years ago, right? It was this week, I think.
Yeah. I told him, I said, I think the Exhorder band and name is bigger now and more demand now for festivals and stuff than it's ever been. I think y'all are more popular than it's ever been. And he said, judging by the social media numbers and all the numbers we get, we are. Mm-hmm. I kind of feel like Zebra's headed in that direction if Zebra is not already.
Yeah, well, I mean, people have, you know, a lot of people have thought we just broken up because we weren't touring anymore. So we weren't in their city, we weren't in their face, and we weren't really promoting the band so much outside of just whatever gigs we were doing the last, you know, 30 years. We do one-offs, you know, fly into a city and then come back home. You know, we weren't really on tour, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But this will be the first year that we're actually out there, you know, doing this is a tour for the 40th anniversary of the record. And I think we're going to be doing more shows this year than we've done in probably 20 years, you know. So, you know, a lot of people are becoming aware that, yeah, not only are they together now, but they never broke up, you know. Mm-hmm. You know.
Yeah.
So it's cool. And it's cool that people keep coming back too. You know?
Man, I think people will. I definitely noticed. I know you've been on Eddie Trunk. Yeah, I've seen y'all get some press. People love Zebra. I look at all the comments and it's always positive and it's always people just loving Zebra. You know, there's something about you that people really like on a deeper level, I think.
Well, that's cool.
I don't have the Karate Kid sequel, but I heard the main character wore a zebra shirt in that show. Is that right?
Yeah, it was wild that he wore it on the show, but we found out that he went to the audition for the original movie, and he was getting himself psyched up for the audition out in his car with No Telling Lies. He was listening to No Telling Lies.
Yeah.
And then he went in and he nailed the audition and got the part. And he's been a big Zebra fan, you know, the whole time. So, yeah, William Zabka. Yeah, we get people talking about it all the time because that show's been very, very successful now, you know?
Yeah. Kyle Thomas, when he saw the record, he said, yeah, No Telling Lies. When that song comes on, it makes you want to flip tables.
That's funny.
Yeah, and he's right. I love that song.
Yeah,
The openers for every Zebra record is a banger. Is that on purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to start it with a, you know, we're a rock band, so you got to start it out rocking, and that's how we've always done it.
Hey, let's not forget Zebra Ford and the kickoff song Arabian Nights.
Yeah, and that's another good example. That's a perfect song to start a record with, you know.
There's a progressive band named Dream Theater who covered the song "Take Your Fingers from My Hair." Have you heard that?
Yeah, yeah. I remember when they did it, and you know, I was flattered that they did it. We knew Dream Theater for a long time at that point. They called themselves something else before Dream Theater, and I should remember it. It's just not coming to me. Mm-hmm. But they opened up a couple of shows for us here on Long Island, way back in the 80s, and so they were aware of the band. They had seen the band, and then when they decided to cover one of the songs, you know, after they had all the success that they had, we were very flattered, you know, because they are a great progressive band, you know.
Oh,
They definitely earned that label, no doubt.
Definitely, and they're still going strong. I love that cover they did. I thought they did a great job, and that's another song where your range is off the hook.
They really did a great job with it. Take Your Fingers from My Hair, yeah.
Well, Randy, I can't thank you and the guys, Felix and Guy, enough for all the music y'all have provided many folks like me, and we still love it. I hope things go well on the new tour. Is there any place I could send people who want to see and hear Zebra and might go check you out?
Yeah, just go to thedoor.com. That's the Zebra website. Like, who's behind the door? So it's thedoor.com.
I ask you who is behind the door, but I'm not. We'll save that for the next time.
Save that for the next time, yeah.
All right. Randy, thank you very much.
Take care.